Welcome to the Radiator Arms, where our games consoles still use cartridges. We're going to be talking about car DIY. Do you work on your car yourself, or do you get a pro to do it? Or is there a happy medium and balance to be had?
And today, you have myself, Will the Plank, and we have...
Ant from Sports and Touring and JM and Friends. And conspicuous by his absence today is our good friend James of JM on Cars, off having fun or working hard or a little bit of both. Now, Will, you and I are almost like polar opposites on this. You will almost always seek to do the work on your cars yourself, and I will almost always seek to not do the work on my cars myself. And one of the things I will get into at some point today is, are you a real car person if you don't do your own work on your cars? Because that is a bit of a debate. But let's just talk a little bit about the kinds of things that we do on our cars and the kinds of things that we don't. Now, the things that you do on your cars is going to be a lot longer list than mine. But let's talk a bit about like some of the cars you've had over the years and the kind of work you've done on them.
Right, so for me, the only way I could afford to get into cars when I was 17 was by buying older, broken cars that needed some love. And one of the things that you have to deal with when you have little money, or basically none, is that you have to learn. As James always would say, it's one of those things where kind of restriction breeds creativity and you find other ways to deal with things. I was always interested in anything mechanical. So myself, when I was little, I remember one of my first memories was staring at my dad's hi-fi. And when I would see that CD player, now this is the 90s, bear in mind, early 90s, so CD players were still the big new technology then when it came to the music world. When I'd see that tray opening up and he'd put that disc in, it would go away and suddenly music started playing of it. I was hooked. I had to know how these things worked. I had to know, which was one of those things where when my dad went away on tour and my mum found me starting to attempt to take the hi-fi apart, let's just put it like that, she was not particularly happy. So I was doomed to work on cars and electronics from a young age. So for me, I just thought, well, you know what? I haven't got a lot of cash, but my dad is kind enough to buy me a Halfords toolkit. So with that Halfords toolkit, I started having a go.
Yeah, I can actually relate to that quite a lot because even when I was a kid, I was playing around with like electronic kits where you could make different electronic circuits, do different things like make lights flash in a particular way or get beeps to come out at different tones, and you'd have to build these kits from scratch. I used to love building anything out of Lego and Meccano as well. That was one of the things that I loved as a kid. So for me, it was more about building things than taking things apart more than anything else. But I did have that same craving. I think for me, though, when I discovered computers, I ended up spending more time at a keyboard than I did using any kind of other tools. And I suppose for me, it was just like not really a thing that I got into. However, when I was in my teens, from about the age of 14, when you were legally allowed to do these things, I actually worked for my dad. And initially, I used to sweep the floor in his metal fabrication shop. And it was him and two other guys that worked there. And then I started to learn how to weld and started to learn how to, do profile cutting and all sorts of other things. I even got to the point where I was able to build up jigs. And then I even got to the point where I was doing technical drawings for him as well.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things that we had as a bit of a side project was a old Wolseley. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but I remember it was very dark green. But this was a very long time ago because I am old. And that old Wolseley, if I saw one, I'd recognise it. And this one was a little bit worse for wear, shall we say. And it was a car that my dad used to call the poor man's Rolls Royce. So we spent quite a lot of time getting that running again. And I spent a lot of time underneath that car or in the engine bay working on it with my dad. So I was quite happy, comfortable and familiar with using tools and getting on the tools with a car. So when I was at a certain point when I was in my teens and I had a car, my 1977 Toyota Corolla liftback. And when I had that, when things like the brake pads needed doing, I had no problem just jacking up the car and changing the brake pads. It was not a problem for me. But I didn't really have anywhere to work. So I was literally doing that on the road. So I was literally crouched in the road with the car jacked up, trying to get the wheel off and change the brake pads in Brixton when I was like 18, 19 years old, which was not the safest thing to do, but...
I think that's actually quite a common story for a lot of people out there who work on cars. Is I've been quite lucky. The unit where we are filming things now, my dad's been here since I was 11, maybe. So the entire time I've been here, I've had the luxury of having a space outside where I could work on a car. And people that have seen, videos on the channel of me working and say, where I did the Golf front end, that's where, I swapped it for the Bora front end. That's something I did here. So I've always had that luxury of being able to park a car, put it on jack stands. If I need to leave it for a few weeks while I'm getting parts or something like that, I can do that. But a lot of people did it on their driveways and outside their houses. I don't think that's something you see as much anymore, but I certainly would remember seeing that about a good, even 10, 15 years ago. That was more common, I think, to see people working on their cars.
Yeah, actually. So Damani often does work on his car on our driveway. And sometimes I'm out there helping him, and people do stop and actually sort of have a conversation. Oh, what are you doing? Because you just don't see it. You just anywhere on my street, you would not see anyone, with the car jacked up, sitting on jack stands, with people underneath it with toolboxes and, wrenches and oily hands. So it is quite an unusual thing by comparison today. But I think that's partly because modern cars have just gotten a bit more complicated. And I think in some ways can be harder to work on, depending on the kind of thing that you're doing. Like you take a modern BMW, if you want to get more power out of it, you've got to have a particular computer software with a license and know what you're doing to plug it in and flash the tune on the car. Whereas back in the day, you could start messing about with timing belts and carburetors in order to get more power out of your car. So it is a different time, I think. So in some ways it's easier because you can buy stuff off the internet, plug it in and flash a tune and hope it doesn't blow up your engine. And in other ways it's harder because, you kind of have to really know what you're doing.
Well, I also think there's something else that has killed that. Finance.
Yeah.
I think finance is a big reason why people aren't working on their cars as much, because you have a warranty, and some manufacturers are giving you like 7-year warranties on your cars, and all you and for instance, like Renault and Dacia, they give you a 3-year warranty on the car. But if you want to extend that up to 7 years, all you do is just get it serviced with them every year, and up until that point or a certain mileage cap, it brings the warranty up another year. So I think that's another reason why a lot of people perhaps don't work on their cars. And maybe it's reliability as well. Maybe newer cars have probably got a little bit more reliability in them in some regards, where back in the day, cars would go through wheel bearings, brake pads, and go through bushes and exhaust systems. Bear in mind that exhaust systems used to be made out of mild steel on a lot of cars, and pretty much everything now has a stainless steel exhaust. You could go back in the day, about 20 years ago or so, to any exhaust shop, and they would have rows and rows and rows of exhausts for all different makes and models. And nowadays, you can get a car that's coming up to almost 20 years old and it's still on the original exhaust system.
This is true, yeah. The old exhaust used to rust through like nobody's business. So I suppose, maybe the frequency at which you might need work done was higher, so you would work on it yourself. But I think it does significantly come down to finance.
Yes.
Because if you've got a lease car or PCP, any kind of finance on the car, and you bought it new, it's under warranty, why would you do the work yourself? In fact, you could invalidate your warranty if you do the work yourself.
Yes, absolutely. But though technically, they're not allowed to invalidate your warranty for not taking it to a main dealer, is something that I understand.
That's true.
Whoever does it has to be a registered and reputable garage, and they also have to use main dealer equivalent parts. But you don't have to take it to the dealer. Well, at least that is what the Renault dealers have told me when I spoke about my wife's car anyway. It might not apply to everyone, but that is what I understand is the general rule.
I can speak to that actually, because I had to investigate this a few years ago when my son's first RX-8 had a problem, and he had a warranty from the dealer, which was one of these aftermarket warranty companies. and they were being extremely difficult, as you would imagine. I mean, honestly, these aftermarket warranties, I wouldn't trust the paper that they're written on, quite frankly. But manufacturer warranties, yes. Extended warranties from manufacturer dealers, yes. But not these aftermarket ones. I've only seen problems with it. But we had to look into it, and the principle is that they would have to show that whatever work was done on the car was the cause of the problem.
Yes.
So they can't just say, "Oh, you've worked on your car yourself, therefore you're invalidated." In fact, even if you change, I don't know, let's say you put lowering springs on it and then you had a problem with the engine. Well, they can't say that because the car was lower that now the engine is gone and that's all. You can't invalidate the whole warranty. You can only invalidate that particular claim. And if anyone does have any problems with this, I highly recommend calling the Financial Ombudsman Service, the FOS. If you're UK based, they've got a helpline and they are really, really helpful. You just talk to them about exactly what the situation is, and they will often advise you on what you need to do next and what needs to be satisfied before they can then get involved. But if you can't resolve it and you've done everything they've told you to do, then often they will then get involved and actually take over the whole case for you. But yeah, I mean, what I meant by invalidating your warranty is if you don't perform whatever service or work on the car according to the manual, according to the specification for the car, which often you can only get if you are a registered repairer of that vehicle, then that's how you may invalidate your warranty, by not following the correct procedure. And if they can show that, and they can show that that was the cause of any failure, then that's what I meant.
Well, there's also another thing with working on your own car and the warranty and stuff is if you make too many changes, you can have your finance invalidated, can't you?
If it's modifications, yes. In fact, most lease agreements, most finance agreements state very explicitly that you must not modify the car without their permission. So if you want to change the car in some way, you need to seek their permission. Now, a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people will just say, well, look, as long as it's reversible, when the time comes, I will just, take the mods off, put back the original parts on and hand the car back. At which point, is it a huge problem? No. What happens and has happened, I think we've mentioned this on the podcast before, particularly with another YouTuber, is they modified their car so extensively that the finance company then found out, because they were quite a big YouTube channel, and then said, right, that's it. Your finance is cancelled. Either you pay us the full amount for the remainder of the vehicle now, or we take the car back. And that was a choice they were given.
Yeah, because obviously that then massively decreases the resale value and, changes the value of the car. Because let's be honest, when you put modifications on your car, you're not really actually increasing the value, are you? You might think you spent all this money and therefore it's worth more, but it's not.
Usually not, no. I mean, it depends on the car. I think, if you get a car that's kind of well known as being a track car and then you modify it to be, better on track.
Yes, I think that there are certainly exceptions to the rule, but if you get your Citroen DS3 and start putting coilovers on it, an exhaust, a catback,
and a body kit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's it. You're devaluing the car straight off the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're making that car yours. You're making that car an expression of you, but not necessarily anyone else.
Yes.
So, the value to you is one thing, but the value to someone else is perhaps lower. It's like someone, freshly decorates their house, right? But they decorate it in some colors that are very unique to that person's taste. Someone comes along and says, oh yeah, but we're gonna have to redecorate the kitchen, we're gonna have to redecorate the downstairs, and that's a lot of work we're gonna have to do. They're like, I just freshly decorated this house. What are you talking about? Well, sorry, but
your taste is different to mine.
Exactly.
That's why a lot of people like to put neutral colors in a house when they sell it, because they're easier for most people to stomach, rather than somebody with their kind of centerpiece random grey wall with their French poodle sitting next to it with their financed Audi on the drive, as the joke always goes.
Exactly. But look, I mean, so finance is one of the reasons why some people might not work on their car, because they bought a new car.
Yes.
Why do the work? Why take the time to do that work when you could be doing other things, when you can hand the car back and have them fix the car and probably, under warranty, get a replacement car to run around in the meantime? So, there's that. But if you've got an older car, then maybe you might want to do the work on it yourself.
Well, here's an example. So my wife had a 2016 Mini. She bought it in 2019. And up until about, I think it was 5 years old, we had it serviced at garages. And then I took over. So with that, I was like, this is a car where to do the basic things it needs doing, brake pads, oil change, coolant change, gearbox fluid change, all of that stuff, which is what I ended up doing on the car. I changed all the filters, the whole lot on it in the time I had it, or that she had it, fuel filter, everything, stuff kind of that, like that. It just makes sense for me to time-wise compared to cost-wise. For me, I found that the hour or two I gave my time to do it far outweighed having to pay a garage 60, £100 an hour. I value my time, because it's another thing when you work on cars compared to getting a garage to do it. You have to see, is your time more valuable spent going out and earning money compared to what the garage is asking? Or do you feel like it's better kind of financial sense to do it yourself? That's another thing, depending on your budget and your income. But it's not even that. I enjoy working on the cars also. It's a double-edged sword, because at one part, I'm saving money, but I'm having fun. And another reason I also like to work on cars myself is because I can trust the work I've done. I don't know what the garage is actually doing. I don't know how they're dealing with my vehicle, if they're treating it with respect, X, Y, Z, and all that kind of stuff, if they've actually topped it up, or if they've done a bit of a half-assed job because, well, I don't know, 5 o'clock is coming soon and they want to go home and the customer's called and asked where the car is. It's fine. Did we torque up that bolt? Oh, who cares? If anything happens, it'll be a problem down the road, whatever. So...
And that happens.
It does happen.
There was one of James's subscribers was bringing an Aston Martin. I forget which one it was now. Was bringing it to James to review, and he'd left it with a garage. I think it was actually a detailing shop that was going to be doing a whole bunch of stuff, including, I think, ceramic coating the alloys and things like that. And they hadn't torqued the wheel properly. And on his way to meet James, the wheel fell off. Ooh. And it was pretty serious. Oh, there was the 720S. That was another example where he was driving down the road and the suspension just fell apart. In fact, I heard about secondhand story from someone else the other day that their 600 LT had the front suspension arm just fall off in exactly the same way, where it clearly hadn't been torqued up properly. So, yeah, those are really good examples, and those are safety-related issues.
Yes.
Another example, actually, is a friend of mine, his Huracan. So a few years ago, took it to a Lamborghini dealer and drove it home, and then came to meet me the next day. Everything was fine. Then on his way home from that, his low oil warning light came on. And it's like, I literally had it serviced like yesterday. How is that even possible? So he took it back to the dealership, and it turned out that they'd started topping up the oil, got distracted, and didn't finish doing it.
And that could be a very expensive mistake for that dealership. And then you have the worry as the owner of how much damage has actually been done to that engine with that low oil, especially if you've been driving it fast, it's slosh. But I assume it was a dry sump system, so it's probably not as awful. But, you will have in the back of your mind forever that thought of, there could be some bearing damage now. That engine might last 20, 30,000 miles less than it would have, but by the time it goes wrong, that'll be way in the future. And how can you there's a lot of things which come to mind.
And for the price of one of those engines, you could buy yourself a luxury EV. So
yes.
You really don't want to, you don't want that to let go. And yeah, there's been quite a few examples of that. And I had the same feeling when Damani and I were swapping over the brakes on my RX-8, but when it was his car.
Yes.
We're taking the stock brakes off because, there's a whole story about that over on the Sports and Touring channel. You can watch that. But when we were doing that piece of work, we took our time to make sure that the brake system was properly bled. And, when we were done, like, that just felt like a solid brake pedal, like a really solid brake pedal. And you just knew it was done right. Whereas if you left it with someone else and had someone else fit those brakes, would they have bled it as meticulously as we did? Would it have come back with a brake pedal that felt great but not necessarily as good as it felt with us, because we made sure that there was absolutely no air in the system.
Well, that is the thing, isn't it? Going back to the Mini quickly, when I actually ended up with my wife trading it in for the car she has now, the dealership who bought it were like, oh wow, that's actually quite a lot of information you've done there, because I would write up lists, what the actual parts cost, the mileage of everything I installed on, a bit of the process as well. And I then found the car a couple of months later for sale online. It just popped up as a suggested advert. I was like, that's my wife's old car. And I messaged the dealer and said, oh yeah, by the way, this is my wife's old car. It's been thoroughly loved and maintained, kind of thing. Good luck with the sale. It'll be a great car for someone. And they replied back and they said, you must be the guy that did all the work on it. I've never seen so much detailed home service information before.
Wow.
In a list. And they were really thankful for that, because as far as they were concerned, that was as good as having it kind of done at any garage. But the other issue with that is you can get two kinds of people that work on their own cars. Somebody like me who is massively meticulous when I do these kind of things. You've seen my engine bays before. There are printed out labels of things on when oil was changed, when filters were changed, everything like that. So at a quick glance, I can see what was done without even having to look at any kind of service record, so I know when it's next due at the top of the hat. So someone like me, that's great. If they work in the car, they followed all the procedures, they bought a torque wrench, they've used it. But you can also get the younger person, who I also was at one point as well before I got wiser and got experienced, who doesn't really know what they're doing, and then can end up kind of doing things kind of half-assed, and then stuff falls off and breaks. And when it comes to systems like brakes, actually, that's a worry. Have they used the right lubricant on the slider pins, or have they just put copper grease in there? And then what is going to happen is that caliper is going to seize up, and you're going to lose your braking one day. The brake's going to be ineffective. You're going to wear your pads. All sorts of things you have to think. So, from a perspective of working on your own car, I would always say, if you haven't really done it before, it's worth getting somebody who knows what they're doing to kind of guide you. I had a bit of luck when I first started working on cars. When I was about 15, my school had a program where we'd go to somewhere called NTS in Norwich. I don't know if it still exists, but basically it was a mechanical training centre, and I did 2 years, once every week or other week or something like that, going down and learning from a proper instructor how to do bits on cars, how to remove alternators, exhausts and things like that, changing belts, changing fluids, changing brake pads, and getting all the basics of that down. So when I started working on cars, I actually had a fairly decent knowledge, not of everything, but of the kind of what not to do, rather than going at it with kind of dangerous knowledge and optimism.
Now, this is an interesting thing. Back when I was working on my cars, there was no such thing as the internet. There was no YouTube. There were no websites that gave you instructions. You literally had to go and buy a book or a Haynes manual or whatever, and just read and look at the pictures and hope you got it right. There was no way of seeing it being done, which for me actually is a huge advantage today, where you can actually go on YouTube and people walk you through the process of doing certain things step by step. Now, on the flip side of that, that can also be a bad thing, because how do you know which video is giving you good advice and which one is not? So that is one of the big challenges, I think.
You're going to laugh at this, because when I started working on cars, like about 15, so that would have been about 2006. YouTube was in its infancy, so there wasn't really a lot of repair videos. There were a couple of people that were doing it back then, and the ones that I always remember is Scotty Kilmer and Eric the Car Guy. Eric the Car Guy was more about Hondas and stuff like that. But I remember when I had my first Peugeot 106 that I had to change a drive shaft on it. And back in the day, I couldn't find really a lot online. There was some information in Haynes manuals, and this is the bit that make you laugh. I used to read Haynes manuals before I went to sleep at night when I was about 10, 11 or 12. I'd go down to the local kind of automotive shop that's no longer there. That was only a minute walk from my house. And I would look at all their discounted Haynes manuals and I would buy them. So I'm probably quite weird for this, but I used to love to read it, because this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to know how these things worked. And even though I didn't understand it all, it was really nice to see the pictures and things like that. But the video side of things, Eric the Car Guy was somebody that showed me how to change a drive shaft for the first time. And I tell you what, the information he gave me in that one video was absolutely invaluable. But he was a qualified mechanic, had been a Honda tech for years. Scotty Kilmer is another well-known internet mechanic as well, and their advice was solid. It was good. But some of the problem is you do get people online who put up information and do stuff the incorrect way. Now, if the videos had enough views from people, the likelihood is you will get people in the comments going, that's wrong, that's not how to do it, that's dangerous, X, Y, Z. But if you're looking for a really specific problem on a specific car that not many people are talking about, you could find a fix and you could find a repair, and it's totally wrong. The amount of times I've seen that as well on things is startling.
So the advice is always check the comments, because invariably there will be enough people in there saying what's wrong with what they're doing.
Yes.
Now, if there's a few people in there saying, no, you're doing it all wrong, don't necessarily take that. Then just do a bit more research. But if there's lots of people, then definitely do some more research.
Also, those people that are saying they're doing it wrong, they also need to preface themselves and say, this is why you're doing it wrong. This is why I think. Otherwise, it's just, what's the point? Why would you pay attention? You're doing it wrong. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
You haven't told me anything meaningful from that comment. I'm going to ignore it.
Yeah, it's like I'm having a bad day, so I'm going to leave a mean comment.
Yes.
But you mentioned the Haynes manual. I've actually got one Haynes manual. One and one only. Can you guess what car it is?
Is it for that Toyota liftback you had?
No.
What's that for?
It's for a McLaren MP44.
Was this one of those manuals they made because it was funny to make it? They know that nobody would ever actually use it.
Yeah.
But they thought but is it actually fully detailed and everything?
Well, I'll take a few clips of it and drop it into the video right now. But yeah, I actually got that because Steve Nichols, who was the lead designer, he was one of the key people involved in designing and creating the MP44, obviously within a team of other people, which he's always very open about and shares the credit with the entire team. James had basically been in touch with him, and we ended up filming this great video where we got to, talk to him about it. And then we got another video where we got to literally start taking the panels off of the car, or rather, I let my son do that. I was not taking liability for that. I was like, if you want to help, you can help. I'm not helping. I'll hold the camera. But yeah, that's the only Haynes manual I've got for that car, which I got as a result of doing that particular video, signed by Steve Nichols himself.
That's quite a cool story. So going a little bit back to working on cars specifically and what we've done. So we've heard a lot about the fact that from a monetary standpoint, and just the fact that I actually enjoy it as well, which I think is quite important, especially in my younger years when I had more free time to do things, would work on my cars a lot. But you don't. And I think that's because you're a lot busier. And I would say that is part of it being the time versus cost fallacy we're on about. When was the last time you would say you actually worked on a car out of choice other than for fun with Damani or something like that?
All right. Yeah. I only choose to do the work on the cars with Damani because I like doing things with him that he likes doing, and it's kind of fun, and we have a lot of banter in the process. So it's just, it's just cool. Trying to think.
So basically, it's been quite a while.
It's been a long time. Do you know, I think the last thing that I did was back in the 90s.
Wow.
And I think it was probably just changing an air filter on my Mark 1 Mondeo 2-litre SI. I think that was it. Before that, just basic maintenance brake pads. But the reason for that is when my Toyota came to its end, I had a couple of years where I was at university at the time, and don't want to harp on the whole thing, but I was kind of in and out of homelessness around that time and had no money and was literally dragging myself by the scruff of the neck through university while working ridiculous hours in a hotel. And so I couldn't afford to buy another car after that car died. I couldn't afford to fix it, so it just kind of went to scrap. When I could then eventually afford another car, it was actually after I'd got my first job in software development. And at the time, in the 90s, you could get paid reasonably well when you were going into that. And the cost of living difference was So much better that even though the exact pounds per hour were probably not much more than today's minimum wage, the cost of living in the early 90s was way different. So, and within a year of my first job, I kind of started to make quite a bit more money, and I could afford to buy a car. But then, yeah, I was really busy. By then, I was married. I bought the Mondeo, I think for £7,500, which I could afford to do cash at the time after my first year in work. Fortunately, I was able to sort of get by without a car for a period of time, but then I had to go back and forth to another office where there was you had to drive there, so I had to buy a car. And then I started doing some other things around my work to try and like elevate myself, lots of like self-study, that sort of thing. So yeah, and then I think then my son was born, and then I just didn't have the time. But also I was getting paid enough that for me to then give up time at home or doing things with my wife at the time or doing things with my son, it was just like, is it worth it? No, I can just do it a couple of hours of overtime and that will pay for it. A few hours of overtime and that will pay for it compared to the time I'd give up with my family. And then later, I just got busier and busier because I started a consultancy. And then it really was a case of, when you're self-employed, you think, right, how much money could I generate, or how much revenue by how much could I grow the revenue with the few hours I might spend on that, plus the tools. Because if you don't have the tools, then you've got to go back buy the tools. So if you're not doing work on your car regularly, you've got the cost of having those tools that you've got to spread out over a period of time. And I didn't have all the tools, and it just didn't make sense. And I've pretty much I think I've had one, two, I just started another company as well, just now, as well. So if you're interested, ask in the comments. It's AI related. I'll say no more. But, I've always got one or two companies on the go at any one time, including YouTube now as well. So yeah, time versus money is really the issue for me.
I was going to say, now you could potentially write off any content of working on a car, for content purposes, for almost making money if you wanted to through YouTube. Do you have any desire to pick up the tools and anything at all? Or is that desire completely gone?
No. And I'll tell you why. Because for me, working on, when I was a kid, working on that old Wolseley was about spending time with my dad. It was about doing something together. And when I work on cars with my son, it's for the same reason. It's about spending time together, doing something. And for me, that's where the pleasure is. Taking things apart, putting them back together on a car, for me personally, is just not something I get a kick out of. So I get gratification at the end when it's all done, but it's that process that you got to go through. And because I'm not working on cars on a regular basis, if I have to do that on my own, I know that it's going to take me at least 4 times longer to do it than just giving it to a shop to do, because I'm going to have to spend ages looking up how do you do this, because I haven't done it in a while. What tools do I need? Do I have everything? Do I have all the tools? Oh no, I'm going to have to go down to the local car spares to try and pick up some new tools that I don't have. Then that's the extra time on top of it. Then you're getting there, then you're checking what you're supposed to do. And it's just one of those things that what should be, something that takes an hour or two then turns into a job that takes 4 hours.
So do you think if Damani said, do you know what, I'd really like to restore a car with you or something as a project, would you be up for that?
Yeah, well, we actually do have a couple of projects that we want to do. It's our ambition to do. And when the channels are at a good place, and once we have enough editors and enough money to pay them, where I can spend most of my time filming and not worrying about the post-production process, which at the moment is something that takes up a lot of time, then that's the kind of thing that I would consider doing. So, but until then, I'm not sure that I would. But then I'd want a unit with good lifts and all the tools, and that's why I mean that I think
you wouldn't want to be doing it on the ground anymore, kind of thing, which I can totally understand, because it's actually quite interesting. I'm starting to get to that point a little bit myself with some of the work I do on cars. Now, I'm 35 next year. As much as I joke about it, I am by no means actually old yet, but I'm at a point where some of the things I was doing 15 years ago working on cars, I remember I was swapping the engine on an Audi A4 in the snow. It was snowing on me, and I was doing it because I wanted to do it. I got this car basically for free, and all I had to do was buy an engine and put it in some other little bits and bobs, and I did that. But nowadays, I go, do you know what? I'm kind of don't think I'm interested in it. Like recently, I've had the Maestro project, as we know. Now that was great for me from start to finish. That was really enjoyable. That was my first kind of proper depth delve into classic car restoring and kind of maintenance and getting things back on the road. I had so much fun with that, and then I then enjoyed the car. I learnt a lot from it, and it was a great time. Obviously, recently, and it's now actually sold, by the way. We haven't mentioned this yet because I've got a new car coming soon, and the Golf is sold. It's no longer in my fleet. But on that car, as we know from previous podcasts, I did so much to that.
Yep.
Everything from full suspension rebuilding to engine work, cylinder head off, gearbox out, clutch, the whole lot. Oh my goodness, so much. I spent hours and hours working on it, thinking about it, late nights staying up, just kind of in my head, what could this problem be? Actually, this is how I'm going to do it. And then researching forums and YouTube videos and go, aha, this is it now, I'm going to do it. And, X, Y, Z. And I had fun with that as well. But I'm at a point where I kind of need a little bit of a break from it, actually, because I'm just tired, man. I'm just tired, and it gets harder to motivate yourself to go out there sometimes and do it when you've been so busy. We've had quite a busy year together. Yourself, James, and I, and my own business as well, my own stuff, which I do, my day job, has meant that I actually haven't had as much time to work on the cars as I wanted to. Now, the Mercedes is a different situation altogether, because a lot of the big work on that has been done to it already. So that's mostly tinkering. And that is something I don't mind doing.
Don't mind? You love it.
Well, okay.
You love a tinker.
I do. I love tinkering. Like we've got the Rover track car outside here as well at the moment. I'm helping get that ready for the track day that's coming up that James is doing, that I'm at. You can't make it, unfortunately, because
I'm going to be in Japan. Watch this space.
I'm hoping for some good content from that. I'm looking forward to that. Oh, mate,
I can't wait.
I'm looking forward to that. But, it's kind of nicer now that I'm thinking of doing things on my own terms. And that's the difference now compared to, say, maybe 10 years ago is I had to work on my cars because I could not afford to do it any other way. With the Golf, there were actually a few jobs that I handed off to my local garage and had them do, because I thought, well, for the cost of getting them to do it while it's down there, bringing it back, getting the car here. For instance, it failed an MOT on, I think it was a CD boot that was split. The total cost with the boot and labour and the MOT was about £108. And I just thought to myself, okay, I'd have to get somebody to drop me down there. I'd have to bring the car back. I'd probably have to get another tool to get that front drive shaft off or something like that, which I didn't have, and then get the boot off, split the drive shaft apart, put it back together. I couldn't be bothered. I was like, yeah, that's fine. I'm really busy this week. And I'm finally at a point where actually on certain things, it makes more sense for me to pay a garage to do them. Hence why as well, I'm also in the trap now of getting a brand new car with a maintenance plan on it and everything like that. So I can actually spend time working on the cars that I want to.
That just made me think. I think there's a couple of in-betweens, right, between you working on it and handing it off to the garage. One of them relates to a company that actually got in touch with us potentially about sponsoring the channel in some way or doing an integration. And this online service is a bit like Checker Trade for mechanics type of thing. And so they would actually just come to your driveway and do work on your car if it's like minor maintenance sorts of things. But there's another thing that my brother sent me, which is this place in America where you can rent out a ramp, and they've got technicians on hand There's like a few technicians on hand who are just supervising. I don't know how they handle like moving the car up and down. I think that might need to be done by one of the technicians for safety reasons. But you rent the ramp. There's a bunch of tools you have access to as well. And they get your car up on a ramp and you work on your car. And then if you get stuck on something, there's a technician who can come and answer your questions and help you along, which I thought was a really interesting idea.
That is quite a cool idea, actually, because then you've got a little bit of a safety blanket as well. Because, you know, when you're working on your daily driver, for instance, and you need to get to work tomorrow and it's 4 a.m. and the car still isn't starting, you've got a problem. But if you've got somewhere you can do it, and
well, I don't know if it's 24 hours. I don't know if you can just rock up.
No, but my point is, a lot of people will know that scenario. What was a 1 hour job ends up turning into an all night affair because you perhaps didn't have the right tool or the correct knowledge. If you get stuck, having somebody there to go, oh yeah, that's easy.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, the other day, actually, it's quite funny. One of my friends called me over because he was like, well, I just can't change the bulbs on this damn car. It was some Golf convertible, I think, or something like that. It's like, I just don't know how to do it, and I'm really worried I'm going to break it. So I walked over, looked up at it, put my hand in it. Within 5 seconds, a bulb was out. He looked at me with just a look of shock on his face and said, how did you do that? I'm like, mate, I used to, as I've mentioned before on the channel many times before, I used to be a fitter at Halfords. I've done hundreds upon hundreds and hundreds of bulbs, blades, batteries, all sorts of stuff. So for me to do it, it was really easy. So having that, that experienced person who can help you out actually sounds like a really cool idea, because you're getting to learn to work on your car in an environment and do some of it yourself, get that satisfaction, perhaps a money saving as well, compared to the financials, that of renting the place versus the job. That's something you'd have to weigh up. I think that's quite a cool and interesting idea and a learning experience as well.
Yeah, I was just fascinated when he said it to me. I was like, wow, so you just like rent this ramp by the hour, the lifts by the hour in a controlled garage environment, few technicians on hand. I think if I remember correctly, there was like about 10 lifts and about 3 technicians or something like that. And it just seemed like a fantastic idea. And I wonder if there's something like that here. But if there is, let us know in the comments. Tell us the name of the company. We'll go and check them out, because if we cover this topic again, it might be worth being able to give them a mention. But on the subject of enjoying working on one's own car, I think it's, for me, it's the gratification at the end that I've got that job done is the big thing, rather than the process. But also, it's sometimes not knowing how easy something is and not having the headspace all the time to go and look it up. Yeah. So if you do have a bit of time, and if you're basically time rich and cash poor, then just look up quickly, how easy is it to do? If it's a basic thing. Actually, do you know what? I just remembered the last thing I did on my car was actually with my son. Was we put spacers on my 370Z. That was it. And that was there's a whole video on the spacers story on my Z. When I was actually having the coilovers done, I actually had that done professionally, because if you're lowering a car, you should also immediately get an alignment done.
Yes, 100%.
Your camber is going to be way off. And I have a great relationship with Abbey Motorsport down in Oxford, and they were setting up these coilover system. Plus, it's got a hydraulic front lift, so there was a lot of running of hydraulic lines to a place where the pump could go. We had to figure out where the pump was going to go. And, while it was there, I was like, well, let's just put the spacers on. Might as well. Then it turned out that they weren't quite the right size, so for the ride height that I wanted. So I either had to lift it and not have spacers or whatever. Anyway, in the end, it just made sense to put the spacers on at home once I got the right size. But that's just like, you take the wheel off, you put the spacers on, you torque the wheel up, job done. It's not a big job.
Well, this is another thing from working on cars, especially if it's in your younger years, in a time where you are, as you said, time rich, cash poor, is once you've got a little bit of general mechanical knowledge and understanding, you're less likely to be ripped off by a garage, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Because if you come into a garage knowing nothing, I'm not saying all garages are like this, but there are garages out there who you'll give them an inch and they will take a mile. It's like that with actually a lot of businesses and a lot of things in life, unfortunately. But if you can talk to them, you have an understanding of what's going on. And if you have a kind of an understanding of what's wrong with your car mechanically and go, hey, I can hear a howling from a wheel bearing. It's coming from the rear. I think it's your near side rear wheel bearing that's gone here. Can you take a look at it? Or I've just jacked it up quickly and I can hear it's making a noise. Can you just do that for me? And they go, yeah, okay. But if you come in saying, oh, my car's making a funny noise, I'm not really sure what it is, they can go, oh, there's this and that, there's this and that. But if they know that you know, and you know that you're going to ask questions and want to see proof, you're probably less likely for them to try and add a little bit on to fill their bank balance that week. And I know it sounds very negative, and I want to stress, not all garages are like that, but historically a lot have been. And the other advantage of knowing a bit about your car mechanically is you can build a rapport with the garage, know the work they've done, and kind of be able to check it sometimes and get a feel for it. And that's how you can end up with a trusted garage.
Yep. That's a very good point. I think one of the good things about having done some work on cars and also being interested in the engineering in and around cars, I do have enough knowledge to know if someone is chatting absolute rubbish.
Absolutely.
I can tell straight off the bat. And luckily for me, I've never found myself in a situation where, actually, no, I have. I can think of one situation. There was a whole long video about it where someone tried to pull the wool over my eyes and it wasn't working. But yeah, that's a very good point. I think that is a benefit. There must be like classes that people can take. Vehicle maintenance classes. It's probably a thing that's worth doing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if somebody is interested in that, then perhaps, it'll go all along down to that. If somebody wants to know so they don't get ripped off, actually, I think a lot of the time, YouTube's great for that.
Yep.
There are people on YouTube that go out there and want to show people. Scotty Kilmer is another one of those people. Yet again, he's an OG mechanic YouTuber, and his goal in his life seems to make sure that people don't have the wool pulled over their eyes by manufacturers and, car mechanics and untrustworthy mods and things, all that kind of stuff. Some of his stuff I don't always necessarily agree with, because I think his views in there are still perhaps a little bit old-fashioned. Like, for instance, he thinks the Toyota Corolla from the 90s is still the best car in the entire world to this day, and it probably is mechanically and reliability-wise, but you don't want to have an accident in an old car when you're carrying your brand new family, kind of thing. But, the premise is there. If you want to learn a little bit about it and kind of help yourself not get ripped off, I think YouTube is a great resource for that. And I'm sure there are plenty of people and plenty of channels out there that are doing that. In fact, people in the comments below, I want you to let us know who some of your favorite channels are of people actually working on car, not necessarily for entertainment purposes, but giving you really good, solid advice as well and teaching you. Because, there's a lot of car YouTube stuff. And I suppose even, the mechanic videos I do on this channel here are kind of meant really for entertainment rather than showing the entire step. But I'd like to think people are perhaps learning a little bit along the way too. But, there are people that are dedicated out there just to the learning.
I had a conversation with my son Damani the other day. Well, I say that like it's a rare thing. We talk about 3 times a day usually. And he was telling me about a TJ Hunt video. And I'm thinking about making a video on this myself, but I'll talk to you about that off camera.
Okay.
But the point TJ was making was that, he was fitting, I think, an upgraded turbo to his BMW M4. And it's got the GT4 kit on it. It looks mental. And one of the things he mentioned towards the end of that video was that, there was a time where, you could actually show each of these individual steps on a build. So even though somebody might not necessarily be able to go there and watch it as a tutorial, they can watch it and see what they went through to make sure that they fitted a part, whatever it happened to be, and to do it properly. And then also the mistakes that YouTuber makes along the way and the learnings that come from those mistakes, and then how they then fix the problems caused by those mistakes. You can learn from that experience. And he said, whereas these days, most builds on cars on YouTube are kind of happen like in a snap. And Marnie noticed that. He said, you know what, Matt Armstrong's like that. It's like there was his most recent Aventador SVJ video. I think there was like 3 videos on the car. It's like, it's broken. We've got some stuff for it and we fitted some of it. And now we've just got, the third video was like, we've got to put the panels on. And now we're in Imola on a private track day.
Yeah.
And it was like, what's happened just there? It was like the Old Spice advert, you know? And, you know, whilst they do show you certain things and you do get to see elements of it, you just can't follow a build over a series of 10 to 20 episodes anymore. It's all got to be crammed into one video. And I feel like we've lost something as a result of that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, because I think a lot of it comes down to just the general kind of amount that most people are accepting to watch these days, so they get bored. We do live in the TikTok, Instagram Reel brain rot generation. For better or for worse, it has changed content where it's a lot more kind of snappier, on point, and getting to it. And even when we make our content and film, we have to succumb to part of that. I've spoke before about how I used to film YouTube videos 10 years ago. I could go through really, really, really in-depth stuff on electronic repair and things like that, and it would get good views. Earlier this year, I did the same kind of style thing on a Dreamcast that James gave me, actually, and I went through in-depth what I was doing. Barely any interest. The actual kind of viewer, you know, figures and things on that, where people were getting bored. And that's just, times have changed. Though some channels, I like to think, have struck the balance really well. And I've mentioned this before, is Nino, the not economically viable channel. He's done some great series on working on the cars and, you know, showing the mistakes he's made, and I like to think he's got a really good balance of voiceover and kind of like, you know, time jumping and actually showing the work. Okay, it's not necessarily a how-to, but you can get a really good idea from his content of what was actually involved in doing it and how he got there.
Yeah.
You know, as much as I enjoy Matt Armstrong's content, and I really do, I take it for what it is. It's entertainment on interesting cars, and, you know, seeing him kind of learning, and I think the story, you know, with his friends, with his dad and stuff like that, I think that is what people really come to watch his channel for, is just, you know, the people he surrounds himself with. And he could almost be making a video on anything, actually. I think, you know, as long as it's with the people and he's putting the passion into it that it is, I think he'd probably still get the same amount of views, to be honest.
I think that's it. Yeah, the relatability that he has, the passion, and the people, for sure.
Well, I have a friend who isn't into cars in the slightest.
Yeah,
but he watches every single Matt Armstrong video.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the people. It's the people. But look, there's one more thing that I think we should cover before we go, and that is, are you really a car person if you don't do your work on your own cars? Now, I've got an opinion on this, and what I'm talking about is not so much like basic maintenance. Like this morning when Will arrived here, I got here just before, and I was checking the oil on the RX-8, because you kind of have to do that on a regular basis, and I was topping it up, and I had no problem doing that. It's just an easy thing to do. I'm talking about actually car builds. You know, people talk about built, not bought, and all of that sort of thing. So if you don't do the build yourself, are you really a car person?
I think you're still a car person. I do. I think if you've gone through the process, or with somebody, of perhaps choosing your parts and choosing what you want and doing some research on it, and I like to think if you have a little bit of kind of mechanical understanding, it doesn't even have to be knowledge of how things work, but I said it's very important to know when things are wrong. Yep. And you know, take James for instance. James doesn't work on cars, but he knows a lot about them, and he certainly knows when a car isn't driving right, and he certainly knows when something is wrong with a car.
Yep.
That is, and James is one of the biggest car people we know. Let's be honest. So right there is somebody who doesn't work on their own cars, though he's going to be, and I'm going to be dragging him, kicking and screaming under that Metro, possibly, and certainly under the Mercedes, for all of your enjoyment. But yeah, I think that's an outdated thing. And I think that's probably people who's always said with a bit of a superiority complex and go, oh, well, that person's got a really, you know, new, fast, highly modified Audi, but they didn't do any work on it. Oh, they can't. They're not a real car person because they didn't slave in the street in Brixton or wherever it was, changing those brake pads kind of things, you know. It's, I don't know.
On the streets.
Exactly. You know, it's, I think anybody can be a car person. I've said this before. without even holding a driving license. If somebody has an interest in cars and somebody has a passion about them, they don't have to know how to do anything on them. If it's something that interests you and you want to learn about it and you're excited about the hobby and you want to share it, you're a car person. You can be somebody who is completely disabled and will never drive a car, or maybe unable to work on a car, but you like cars. You're a car person.
I think so. I mean, look, when I was about 5 years old, and we'd be driving along, me and my dad, and I'd just be pointing out all these interesting cars. I'd know the make, the model, the engine sizes that were available for the car, what was new and interesting about that car. I just knew it all because I was constantly reading car magazines, even from a very, very young age. And I was, asking my dad all about these things. And the weird thing is, my son started to do that. We both had an obsession with cars, and starting with just toy cars, like Matchbox toy cars, from about the age of 3. And it was almost genetic. He started doing the same thing. And I was like, oh, what's this all about? And he was the same. Like, we would go on a drive somewhere. And this was before I had a particularly interesting car. That's when I had my second Mondeo. And, he was just always talking about stuff to do with cars. And it was an obsession. And I would say that he was a car person then. He didn't have a driving license. He hadn't worked on a car yet because he was too young, but he was a car person. But you know what I say to a lot of a lot of the built versus bought folks. And I think the word is inferiority complex rather than the other way around. What I always say is like, oh, right, so tell me about your build. All right, what did you do? And then they were like, oh, well, I got, these 3-piece wheels. I was like, right, wow, did you actually make them yourself? I went, well, no. I was like, well, did you buy them? Yeah. I was like, did you assemble them yourself? Well, no. But you put them on the car yourself. But yeah. So you put a wheel on a car. Okay. And then, what have you had done to the engine? Oh, it's fully forged, blah, blah, blah. So you strip the engine and, polish the interior of the head and the block and fitted your piston. Well, no, I had an engine build to do that. Okay. So it's a really nice paint job you got on the car. You got paint shop, a paint booth, and you painted the car yourself? Well, no, I've got a body shop to do that. It's like, well, why, or what part of the build did you actually do? And it's usually just fitting a few bits and pieces. They haven't really done anything. Oh, well, so you tuned it yourself? Well, no, I took it to a dyno. I said, you've got a dyno in your garage? Well, no, I took it to a tuning shop. So how much of the car did you actually build yourself? And this is the thing. I feel like it's like literally people slap on a few parts and say, yeah, I built it. There's one or two people that I know of who literally they've cut up the bodywork of the car, sanded down the wide body kit that they've put on it and got it all smoothed and painted it in their garage, and they've stripped the engine apart and done. There are a few people that I know of who actually have built that car, but for the most part, it's literally someone's just taken some bits off, cut a little piece to let the cold air intake go through and stuck an intake on it, and it's just like, sorry, mate. It's
the old trope of, are you a mechanic or are you a fitter? So
exactly.
There you go.
I think they're called technicians now.
Oh, technicians now.
Oh, actually, no. Yeah. Well, I suppose there's actually a different thing. Yeah, you've got an engineer who designs the stuff, which people often confuse. Then you've got a mechanic who actually understands how these things work and can diagnose and fix problems. Then you've got a technician, I think, which is just generally a fitter, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah.
Well, I think I want to leave you all on a little story, maybe before we wrap up. And it's actually going back to what you were talking about Damani when he was young. Now, how I knew I was a car person when I was young was I have a very prevalent memory of my dad bringing home his M535i E28 BMW. Still to this day, that is a core childhood memory of seeing that car roll up and thinking it was just the coolest thing. So obviously it had the M Sport kit, it had the quad lamps as it would have back then with the little wipers and bits and bobs. It had really nice leather and seat. It had the digital kind of driver aid stuff, the early stuff from the 80s, where they would tell you I think fuel consumption, whatever it was, possibly the trip computer, and up above your head you had the panel lights as well, which would tell you if a bulb was blown or if there was some problem with the brakes and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I remember I was maybe 3 or 4, something like that, and I went into primary school for my show me and tell me thing, which we did.
Yeah.
Now, for the show me, I brought my little fire truck that my dad had bought me, which was slightly broken, and when I bent it in half, it made farting noises. But for the tell me, I told everybody about my dad's BMW, and I thought it was the coolest car ever. And the thing I liked about it the most was it had dual exit exhausts.
Wow.
Because it had 2 tips on there, and the teacher was looking at me like, the other kids are like, and I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If I was in that class, I'd have been like, oh, yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah. Then I didn't have a license. Then I didn't know how to work on cars. But, yeah, it's what started it all off. That car actually, I think, started it all off.
Amazing. And that is the thing. And I think for me as well, a big part of what's come out of today is how when you are working on your car, it can be a bonding experience with other people, whether it's friends or your parents, your mum or your dad. It's a thing that you can be doing together that's productive, useful, saving you money, and bringing yourself closer together through a shared experience.
Oh, my goodness. Some of my closest friends I've had have been through working on cars together. You know, one of my other friend, Will, it's funny, worked at Halford together. I was Big Will. He was Little Will because he was shorter than me. But we had our interest in 106s and Saxos and things all the time. And yeah, we'd turn up here on the weekends or after work or something, and we just tinker with the cars. That's just what we do. So yeah, friendships and working on cars, another really good positive thing that comes out of them.
Exactly. So let us know in the comments if you are someone who likes to work on your cars or if you hate it. Also tell us if you love it and just don't have the time because it's cheaper for you to work and let someone else do the work for a cheaper price than the money that you're making. Either way, let us know what is your favorite moment of having worked on a car. Now, as we've mentioned our dads both a lot today, I'll just give a quick plug to a video that I did recently with Ben of Dad Cars. It's all about my RX-8, and one of the things we talk about in there a lot is to do with, you know, the memories we have of the cars that our dads had when we were growing up and how that's kind of shaped us. But also, how do you choose a good enthusiast car if you're a parent? And on that note, I'm going to say goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from me.
And like, subscribe, all of that stuff. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.